person prior to speaking. Board members can do this by physically raising their hand in their screen. For members of the public, we ask that you use the raise hand feature within Zoom at the appropriate time. Now, if you've dialed into the meeting, you can raise your hand by dialing *9 on your phone. Let me repeat that. If you dialed into the meeting, you can raise your hand by dialing *. We want to keep our comments succinct to the point for the benefit of a productive meeting. All voting will be done in the form of a roll call vote. When a member of the public is recognized, the member of the public will be unmuted and will be asked to state his or her name and address before speaking. I ask for your patience and cooperation as we handle tonight's business, and thank you in advance for this and attending tonight's meeting. The Zoning Board of Appeals hears three types of matters. One is what we call a dimensional variance. In order to get a dimensional variance, the petitioner must establish a practical difficulty and get 4 affirmative votes approving their requested variance. The second type of matter that we hear is what we call a use variance. In this case, if there's a higher standard, the petitioner must show a hardship and is required to get 5 affirmative votes in order to get a use variance. And finally, the third type of matter that we hear are appeals from decisions of city officials or boards. And in those situations, the applicant must establish an abuse of discretion on the part of the city official or the board and get 4 affirmative votes or overturning the decision of the city official or board member. Our procedure is a presentation is made by the Community Development Department, and the board members are given an opportunity to question the individual from the Community Development Department. After that, a presentation is made by the petitioner. One person is allowed to speak on behalf of the petitioner unless the petitioner needs some technical support, and we allow someone else to speak. After the petitioner has made his or her presentation, the board members are given an opportunity to question the petitioner. Once the board has all its questions answered, we open this to the public for public comment. We ask that, as I indicated before, that you use the raise your hand on the Zoom or *9 on your phone. And when you are recognized, you're to state your name and address, indicate whether you're in favor or opposed to the appeal, state the reasons why you are for or against the appeal, and the comments are to be directed to me. Each speaker shall not have more than 3 minutes to comment. Each speaker will be allowed to speak once to a specific appeal. After all public comment, the applicant will be given an opportunity to respond to all public comment. Once we close public comments, that we take no further comments from the public or the applicant, and a motion is made to either grant or deny the variance or to overturn the decision of a building a city official or a board. Right now, we're going to take roll call of the board members.
Charles Lilly.
Here.
Jason Canvasser.
Here.
Kevin Hart. Richard Lilly.
Yes. Here.
John Miller.
Here.
Eric Morganroth.
Here.
Francis Rodriguez.
Here.
Jerry Attia. Ron Reddy.
Okay, we have 6 members present. We will have Mr. Hart is running into a little problem, but he will be here shortly, so we will have a full board. Okay, now I'm going to take the roll call of the applicants. Is there somebody here for 501 South Eaton?
Yes.
Okay. Is there someone here for 1602 Cole?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there someone here for 1884 West Melton?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Someone here for 1165 Hillside?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. Someone here for 515 Westwood?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. And finally, 1055 Larchley.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Yes. Yes.
all right. Board members, you have before you the minutes of the May 12th meeting. Are there any corrections? Okay, hearing that. Does someone want to make a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All right. Let me recognize you. Okay, Mr. Morgan made the motion and it was seconded by Richard Lilly, correct?
Correct.
All right, so the motion is to approve the minutes as presented. Call the roll, please.
Eric Morgan,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Charles Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Jason Canvas.
Yes.
Okay. The minutes have been approved. All right. We've had some correspondence that came in since the packets were sent out. I assume, Mr. Johnson, all board members got a copy of that correspondence. Did the appellants get a copy of that correspondence?
I believe they have, but Jeff Zilke could confirm.
Okay.
Yes, they have.
All right. Very good. Okay, so we're going to call appeal 20-22 501 South Eaton.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone see my screen and hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. I'm Brooks Cowan with the City of Birmingham, presenting appeal number 20-22. The applicant, known as Whistle Stop, appeared before the Board of Zoning Appeals on May 12, 2020 to request a parking variance of 17 spaces. The subject property is 3,729 square feet and currently has a total of 21 parking spaces. 13 of them are on site and 8 are located on street as approved by City Commission in 2007. These spaces can be used by anyone as well. Whistle Stop currently occupies 1,500 square feet of the subject building and requires 20 parking spaces as a restaurant use, leaving 1 parking space for the remaining 2 tenants. The applicant is proposing to expand Whistle Stop into a 2,550 square foot restaurant, which would require 34 parking spaces. The remaining tenant space is proposed to be an office or retail space, making the total parking requirement for the building to be 38. Therefore, the applicant has requested a dimensional variance of 17 parking spaces. And for some background on the building and the use, the subject property was built in 1968, and that is when Whistle Stop moved in and has been there ever since. And in 1968, the building was required to provide 12 parking spaces on site, and that's what we see existing there today. And it was in 1974 that the zoning ordinance was amended to require restaurants to provide 1 parking space per 75 square feet and created a nonconformity for the building. So during the May 12th hearing, the applicant had indicated that they had an informal agreement with their neighbor Griffinclaw to the south for shared parking, where if Griffinclaw patrons parked here or if Whistle Stop patrons parked here, they wouldn't file any complaints against each other. The Board of Zoning Appeals motioned to postpone last month's hearing in order to enable the applicant more time to ensure that they had exhausted all possibilities in pursuing a shared parking agreement. So following the May 12th meeting, the planning department worked with the applicant to pursue the various possibilities that the ordinance allows in a shared parking agreement, which includes the following. One option was to pursue a shared agreement that would reduce the amount of spaces requested in the variance. So right now, Griffin Claw is required to provide 72 spaces, and they have 78 on site, which is an excess of 6 spaces. And these 6 spaces could be shared with Whistle Stop through an agreement demonstrated to the city. And this agreement would not have to be recorded on the land title for those 6 spaces. That would reduce the variance request from 17 down to 11, but the applicant has indicated they were unable to achieve such an agreement. Another option was to pursue a shared agreement that eliminated the entire need for a variance by a shared agreement for 17 spaces. If Griffin Claw were to share 17 spaces with Whistle Stop, the agreement would have to be recorded on the land title of both properties, since Griffin Claw would be sharing a portion of their required 72 spaces. 6 of those could be through a contract demonstrated to the city, but the remaining 11 would require recording on the land title for both properties. And the applicant, Whistle Stop, has indicated they were unable to achieve such an agreement as well. And then the possibility of a neighbor requesting on-street spaces to be included towards their parking count and then sharing them with Whistle Stop was also discussed. For instance, Griffin Claw has 5 on-street spaces on Eaton and Palmer here. Iron Gate has 17 on-street spaces surrounding its borders, and then Crosswinds to the north has 52 on-street spaces. All of those 3 projects provide their parking on site, but it was determined that under the current ordinance, properties cannot share on-street spaces in a shared parking agreement. For instance, Iron Gate couldn't request City Commission to count 17 spaces along its boundary towards their count, and then turn and enter into a shared agreement with Whistle Stop. All shared parking spaces have to be off-site. Therefore, the applicant has indicated that they've exhausted all possibilities regarding a shared parking agreement, and they were unsuccessful in trying to obtain these. And then also questions regarding the Birmingham master plan update that is underway were also brought up at last month's meeting. And there are a few recommendations in this master plan that are relevant to this current application that we wanted to bring up. There's an entire chapter dedicated to the rail district in the draft master plan update. The plan discusses how the lower rail district here, this portion, is mostly composed of single-story older buildings that do not meet the current zoning ordinance requirements. It also discusses how these older single-story buildings create a unique character for this area. And this was described as gritty and cool by the master plan team. And the draft plan is quoted as saying that everything should be done to support its continued existence and extension as a one-story building or buildings embedded in small parking lots to kind of keep that unique character of the area, which they believe provides a little bit different option for people who may not want to go downtown. And so as such, the rail district recommendations in this draft master plan recommend a lower rail district and creating an overlay zoning to implement more lenient development review standards for that. And relevant to this situation is that recommendation number 3 recommends that the rail corridor include a provision to eliminate parking requirements for current and future one-story buildings. And then going through the plan and the boundaries where they drew it, Whistle Stop is currently located just on the northern edge above the boundary that they drew. It seemed like the master plan team used Palmer Street as the reference point for this lower rail boundary extending down to Lincoln. And so I contacted the DPZ team to have them explain why the boundary was drawn like this. And their response was that Whistle Stop should be included in this boundary and will be corrected in the final draft due to the age, the single-story design, and the location of the building. His exact words were something like, "Oh, geez, yeah, that should be included in there. It meets the same type of character as the rest of the lower rail district." And with that, I leave it to the board with any questions or comments, and I can pull up the site plan if you'd like as well.
Okay, Brooks, you included some of this information in our packet on mixed-use districts.
Correct.
You have that in front of you?
I do not have it in front of me, but I can pull it up real quick.
All right, because I got a question on what this one recommendation means.
Sure. Okay, I have it in front of me if you want to give me the page number.
All right, it's page 228. Referred to, you prepared these materials we got, giving the history of them trying to get this.
Yeah.
All right, so on page 228 under recommendations, under 3, down 3.
Yep.
The first one says eliminating building frontage sidewalk requirements. And the second one says eliminating parking requirements except as on-street parking shall be as determined by the immediate neighbors of the adjacent Torrey or Kenning neighborhoods. What does that mean?
A portion of the rail district recommendations is that the area along Lincoln and I believe Cole and Commerce, they're recommending that these on-street parking spaces be allowed to be used for the parking requirements of the surrounding buildings, but that reaching this kind of agreement would have to be coordinated with the surrounding neighborhood and neighborhood associations. Kind of large-scale picture of the entire plan is of involving more neighborhood associations, neighborhood groups for agreements like that. So.
But that's for just dealing with the parking spaces in the rail district. What about in their neighborhoods?
Right. The residential parking permits would still hold true. This area that they're making the recommendation for is solely for the rail district, which is east of Eaton. So in regards to residential parking, I know that Hazel, Bowers, and Haynes up here on the other side of Whistle Stop, they all have residential parking permits required on this block. And so it is a recommendation for a mixed-use corridor, but it recommends coordinating with adjacent neighbors as well.
Okay, so do you know what the current seating capacity is for the Whistle Stop?
The current seating capacity is, let's see here, is 55 seats as indicated by the applicant to us.
All right, and what are they proposing if they get the variance?
The current site plan indicates, they said that they would have 86 seats. This part gets a bit tricky because the zoning ordinance for parking doesn't accommodate, seating arrangements for restaurant uses. The parking requirements is only based off of square footage of the use. So I believe Whistle Stop's trying to expand by 1,000 square feet, and that's where the increase of parking is based upon.
So it's partly this parking issue is created by the fact that they are adding on the 1,000 square feet for that second unit of the building, right?
Correct.
And they're not going. And how much do you know how much of that second unit is going to be used for seating?
I believe the applicant has more details on how much of the restaurant is going to be used for seating. What the applicant has indicated in their letter is that most of the expansion for the restaurant is to bring the restaurant up to ADA compliance and also up to building code compliance. And so they're trying to make the kitchen, the bathroom, and the aisle widths for the restaurant up to code. I believe I spoke with the applicant about how their expansion on that, and I believe that they'll be able to speak more to how much of the expansion is being used for the restaurant. And so, for seating, the difficult part in determining that for parking is that they have a number of booths. And so do you count a booth as 4-person or 6-person? And I think that's why seating isn't included in the parking calculations for restaurants. We just go by square footage.
Okay. So sort of the square footage calculation is sort of taking into consideration there can be some variations in the seating capacity.
Correct.
All right. Any other board members have questions? Mr. Morganroth.
Do we know how many additional tables that are being added versus seating?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't have an additional table count. I can pull up the site plan. I think the applicant may be able to speak more to the table count. I can pull up the plans here for a better idea of what the floor plan will look like. And so, can everybody see the floor plan on my screen?
All right. Before you go any further, I just noticed Mr. Hart is here now, so we now have 7 board members present. All right, go ahead.
So here's the floor plan that they're proposing. This dotted line indicates where they are right now. And so it's a bit of more of an open floor plan, but what they want to do is be able to increase the prep area, increase the aisle widths, make ADA compliant, and increase the size of the bathroom in order to bring the building up to code. And so these along here indicate booths. So 3, 5, 8 booths, and then 2 tables in the middle, and then the same style diner counter that they currently have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other, Mr. Johnson, you want to pull up all the members so I can see if anybody else has any questions?
Hey, Bruce, can you unshare your screen?
Yep.
All right, Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, in regards to that third space, if it's used for office, how many parking spaces would they need?
They would need 4 spaces.
So we would be back if once they release that space for another variance request, correct?
That's my understanding. Things like this get tricky when we're dealing with existing nonconformities because those spaces have been carrying over their nonconformity for a while. And so generally we have to, we look into how long it's been vacant. And so sometimes they can provide proof that it has not been vacant for more than 6 months. But if they can't and it shows that it has been vacant for more than 6 months, then yes, they only have 1 more parking space remaining for those 2 tenant spaces because assuming whistle stop remains, there's only 1 more parking space for the 2 spaces.
All right.
Well, I want to correct something a minute here. I want to ask something. I'm sorry to interrupt you here. Because on the case description, it says that they would need 34 spaces, but we need 4 for that other unit. That's how we get up to 38. So they already have 21 and they're asking for 17. So that
sorry,
are already being covered right now in this request.
Sorry, to confirm Jason's question. Sorry, those 4 that I was discussing was was on the site plan for them proposing that southern space. Are you asking if that southernmost space, as currently demised, went in as an office, how many parking spaces would it need?
Well, it was going to be a 2-part question. I think I just read the answer, but yeah, it sounds like we need 4 parking spaces, but that's taken into account in this request, correct?
Correct. We did 34 for the hypothetical expansion of the restaurant, and then 4 more for the remaining 1 space.
However, in answer to Mr. Canvasser's question, if they rented out this unit and it was for not office, for something else that required more parking, they would have to come back again for a variance.
Correct. With the higher intensity parking use, if they try to put another restaurant, then yeah, definitely they would. We were speaking with the applicant on requesting the number of spaces, and it was recommended that they indicate, okay, let's keep it office retail for that general area, because you don't know what's going to be there yet. The lowest they could go was a type of gym, and that would be, I believe, 2 to 3 more spaces.
Okay. Mr. Rodriguez, you had a question?
Yeah, so the plans show that there's going to be outdoor seating as well. Is that taken into account at all when determining required parking spaces, or no?
No, the parking space, the ordinance actually specifies that outdoor dining is not considered within the parking requirements for restaurants due to the seasonal nature of outdoor dining.
Any other questions for Mr. Cohen? Okay, who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
To be Jerome Pesic. Trying to unmute him right now.
Okay.
I'm hitting unmute, but it doesn't seem to be working.
Hello?
Yeah, you got him. We got him now.
Okay, I'm here. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jerry Pesic. I'm from Steinhardt, Pesic and Cohen. We're located at 380 North Old Woodward in Birmingham. We're the attorneys for the petitioner in this particular matter. I'd like to indicate that also present this evening are the petitioners, Walter and Elda Jomaki. And of course, they're the owners of the Whistle Stop Diner. Also present is Juwan Maddie, the project architect, so that's, and she'll be available if there's specific questions about the design or the seating layout, that type of thing. As indicated, we're seeking a 17 space variance. This plan was approved by the planning board in January of this year. And as indicated, the project would add on approximately 1,000 square feet, 1,050 square feet, I believe, to the adjacent space at the diner, which is 1,494 square feet. As indicated by Mr. Cowan, we did, at the request of the board at the May meeting, reach out to our neighbors to see if any additional parking could be obtained through agreement with them. As you may recall, we have an informal parking arrangement with the Griffin Claw and Norman LePage. It's been in place for some time, and as Mr. LePage indicated in an email to this board before the last hearing, it seems to work very well, and he is very supportive of this project. We reached back out to Mr. LePage at the request of the board to see if we could get him to enter into some sort of more formal agreement as the ordinance speaks to. We proposed to him again formalizing the reciprocal parking agreement. We proposed, consistent with what Mr. Cowan said, some sort of a lease or license agreement with regard to his additional spaces. We talked about the on-street parking, and actually our communications were directly with his counsel, who was in turn communicating with Mr. LePage. And in each instance, with regard to each request, he indicated that he was not in a position to agree to formalize anything in writing. That's the extent of what we were told. And so, unfortunately, other than the informal agreement, we're not going to get any potential assistance or relief from Mr. LePage, although, again, I'd indicate he continues to tell us that he is very supportive of the project, and we believe he is. We also reached out to Dominic Masheri, from the owner of the Iron Gate Apartments. They, of course, were not able to offer us any on-site spaces because they need those for their tenants. But they were, again, very supportive of the project and indicated that they would share any on-street parking that's available to them. Unfortunately, we were subsequently advised by the planning department that type of shared arrangement is not allowed. I would indicate that Mr. Masheri, in his response to us, which I think is attached as Exhibit B to a supplemental letter I submitted on June 2nd, indicated that he's extremely supportive of the project, that in fact he thinks the diner itself is a selling point for people renting apartments in the complex. And I think he closed by saying, we're very pleased to be your neighbor. Your success is our success. And again, extremely supportive of the project. Now, since as a practical matter, it's additional permanently committed spaces are not available, I want to again briefly review the project and why granting the requested variance is appropriate. As indicated, the diner has been open in its current location for decades, going back to 1968. The project is going to combine the diner with the adjacent space to create a larger and safer kitchen area, including a larger cooler for the employees and roomier and more comfortable seating areas, restrooms, and common areas for patrons. It will also importantly make the diner ADA compliant. I'd like to respond to the inquiry about the additional seating area. Mr. Cowden pointed out on the site plan, there's only a very small portion of the adjacent space that is going to have any seating in it. And in fact, we did some measurements, and there's actually, out of the 1,050 feet proposed expansion, only 300 square feet of that is going to be used for additional seating area. The reason that additional seats are available, and if you'd like, what Ms. Maddie can speak to the numbers. The reason that we can go from 55 to 82 is the existing 1,494 square foot space had a wall that broke it up, and it had a stair up to that additional space that was broken up by the wall. So that wall's been eliminated. The space has all been put on one level to make it all ADA compliant. So the consequence of that is there is the opportunity for more seating. I think that's obviously flexible, and of course, unfortunately, in today's environment, we'll probably end up with less seating, at least for some period of time, in terms of the COVID safe requirements. In addition to the fact that the building footprint is not changing, due to the shape and location of the building, there isn't any room for additional on-site parking, and due to the nature of the surrounding area and the neighbors, there's no way to expand the site. So it's very important, I think, in considering the petitioner's request here, to take into account the applicable zoning ordinance. This is in an MX zone, and the intent of the overlay district, which, and I quote, encourages the retention, improvement, and expansion of existing uses in the corridor. And also that flexibility is an important part of the overriding intent of an overlay district. Now, issues relating to the master plan did come up at the last meeting, and Mr. Cowan, I think, covered that very well. And again, I think when you look at the proposed draft master plan, you'll see three important points that I think should be taken note of. One is encouraging making adjustments to the overlay district. The second is allowing the unique nature of the district to continue, particularly where single-story structures are involved. And of course, as mentioned, it proposes eliminating parking requirements for the unique single-story buildings. And in discussing the lower rail district, the plan states everything should be done to support its continued existence and its extension as one-story buildings embedded in very small parking lots. Now, I went through at the last hearing all of the factors in Article 8.10 F3A of the ordinance that the board has to consider in making a determination on the variance request. And I'll just briefly review them for the board again. First of all, number one is due to the special conditions applicable to the subject property, the provisions of the ordinance, if strictly applied, would unreasonably prevent the petitioner from enhancing the property for its permitted use. So again, the Eaton Street corridor plan going back to 1999 has recognized the whistle stop for its service to the immediate neighborhood and for its pedestrian-friendly atmosphere. It's exactly the type of facility, frankly, that the ordinances are speaking to when they call for encouragement and flexibility towards retention and improvement of the existing uses in the corridor. The second component, literal enforcement of the ordinance, will result in practical difficulty and unnecessary hardship. If the parking requirements are literally applied, it will likely preclude the diner from redesigning and upgrading its interior space. The third factor, the granting of the variance will not be contrary to the spirit and purpose of the zoning ordinance, nor contrary to the public health, safety, and welfare. Response, the proposed improvements are within the ordinance's intent to encourage the continuation and enhancement of the current uses, and the improvements will make the diner safer and more comfortable for employees and patrons. And lastly, the granting of the variance will result in substantial justice to the property owners, the owners of the property in the area, and the general public. Again, granting the variance will allow the owner to improve and enhance the current use of the property despite the limitations of the site, and it will create a safer and more comfortable environment for employees and public in a manner that's consistent with the applicable ordinances. Lastly, I think it's important to note that the practical difficulty and hardship here are not self-created. They're present because of the existing size, shape, and other features of the property, the building, and the area. The property's been used as a diner for decades, and as well as other retail uses. And when it's all said and done, the footprint of the building here is not going to change. To summarize, I'd like to say this: the Whistle Stop's is clearly an iconic restaurant in the area, which has been extremely popular for decades. The petitioner is currently in its circumstance. The restaurant is older. It needs upgrading and improvement. That because in order to do those upgrades and improvements has to be ADA compliant. This project simply cannot be constructed and make the kitchen larger to accommodate to make it safer for the staff, to enlarge the restrooms to make them ADA compliant, to enlarge the aisles to make them ADA compliant. It simply can't be accomplished in all likelihood without some sort of an expansion. And in this instance, the opportunity to expand into the adjacent space is clearly there. And again, what we're talking about in terms of additional seating area is only an additional 300 square feet out of the 1,060 square foot expansion. The purpose, spirit, intent of the city ordinances applicable to the rail district and the Eaton Road corridor are again to encourage development and to encourage the retention, improvement, and expansion of existing uses that help define the corridor. The Whistle Stop is a quintessential example of an encouraged use within the district, and in particular the Eaton Road corridor, and an expansion and improvement of this use, I believe, is expressly supported by the ordinances. For all these reasons, and as well as the statements that I made at the May hearing, as well as our May 23rd and June 2nd letter, we're respectfully requesting that this board approve the 17 space parking variance. Happy to answer any questions at this time.
Mr. Cussick, you indicated at the last meeting that the restaurant has a lot of neighborhood clientele. Do you have any statistical information on that?
I'm told by the owners that they believe, particularly in the summertime, probably about 50%, number one, of their patrons walk to the restaurant from the neighborhood, mitigating parking requirements. And again, I'd also point to Mr. Mosheri's email where he said it's a substantial draw for the people that live in the Iron Gate apartment complex next to him. I would suspect it's also a substantial draw for the people who live in the parking and areas to the east. But yes, it's clearly, I believe, a neighborhood diner, and I believe the owners would definitely verify that, and they have to me.
Mr. Morgenroth?
A couple questions. First, the walk-in cooler and walk-in freezer, if those are new additions, which I assume they are, because I don't see them on the
They are
original site
additions, but
plan.
it is a small addition, but our understanding is that because it's not occupied by anyone, it doesn't count in the square footage count.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. My question was, if they weren't there and you put those inside the building, would that allow for 2 additional spots?
No, the computation, the non-occupiable space is not included in the computation, as I understand the ordinance. And
No, but I'm asking if that walk-in cooler and walk-in freezer weren't put in, could you park cars along that wall?
where they are, it's somewhat tight back there. I don't think you could get cars back in there. That's
Okay. So second question, my kids are now in their late teens, and I took my kids, to Whistle Stop for many years, and I went too as a kid. So I support the concept of what you're trying to accomplish. So trying to be generous, if I just put 1 car for every booth, 1 car for every 2-top, 1 car for a pair of people at the bar, I get 20 cars I would need just for the main building. Then I need 4 for the tenant space, which is 24. And let's assume that everybody at the outside space, which is almost 20 people, are all walking. How do I provide a variance to allow more cars to show up at this restaurant than the area will support? Help me understand how I do that.
Well, I think there's a substantial number of street parking spaces that aren't dedicated per se that are available. I'd also indicate that, again, there's a substantial amount of walk-up traffic. In terms of the number of tables, again, that could change, obviously, somewhere along the way. And my understanding is, again, as Mr. Cowan indicated, that the number of tables, the number of seats in the restaurant is not part of the parking requirement calculation. It's really about...
No, I hear you. You're trying to point out that in the additional square footage of 1,000, you're only adding 6 tables. So if I'm going to use the table count as your benefit, then I have to look at all the table count. If we're just going to look at square footage, then you're adding 1,000 square feet in that square footage. So we really can't have it both ways. I either have to count tables because you want me to identify tables, or I have to count square footage. So I'm trying to use the benefit of the doubt and consider tables, but tables doesn't work either. So I'm just trying to look at how you help me figure that out.
Right. Well, I think the question was asked to Mr. Cowan, how many additional tables or how many additional seats, and he attempted to address that. In terms of the number of tables, we can have Ms. Maddie address that. But at the end of the day, 300 square feet are being added on. That's added on to the table seating area. That's basically 4 parking spaces if you go 1 to 75, so to speak. I don't believe when you look at what's going on here that it really does add a substantial additional amount of cars to the mix. I mean, also the tables, a number of the tables are identified as 6-seater tables. Likelihood is you have 4 people oftentimes sitting at the 6-seat tables, 2 people sitting at a 4-seat table.
Yeah, that's why I gave you 1 car per table and just 2 for the 6 tops. So I thought I was being generous there, but I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. All I'm indicating is that when you look at the square footage addition, it really isn't a substantial additional, let's call it, mix in terms of the number of people that are going to be going to the restaurant on a daily basis.
I hope that isn't true. I hope they're full.
Well,
thank you.
Well, again, Mr. Pesek, you're only adding 300 square feet to the eating area, but you're almost increasing you're increasing the seating capacity by more than 50%.
Good. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is I think what maybe is getting a little bit, I don't want to say lost here, but the big issue here is in order to make the restaurant ADA compliant, we have to, I don't know if anybody's been in the restrooms in the restaurant, but they're pretty small. So we're adding on ADA compliant restrooms. There's an additional employee-only restroom that's being added on. The kitchen area is being expanded to make it safer for the employees. Right now, it's a very, very tight kitchen area. The cooler is taking some of the stress out of the restaurant area itself. And of course, because of the ADA compliance, we're talking about substantially wider aisles and that sort of thing. So the additional seats, candidly, were not what the intent of the remodeling was. The intent of the remodeling was to make it a safer restaurant for the employees and a more comfortable facility for the guests. But as a consequence of the fact that we now have to be ADA compliant with the wider aisles, the larger restrooms, the vestibule, etc., the consequence of that is, in fact, more seating. But that isn't the intent of the remodeling and the expansion. The intent is safety and comfortability for those customers that have been coming there for years. I mean, it's an established restaurant. They have an established customer base. It is obviously possible, and I suppose it would be great if there were more customers coming in as a result of this. But there's no way to do it without showing a plan that shows the possibility for additional tables. And as I said earlier, in the environment that we're in right now with the COVID restrictions, as a practical matter, for some undefined period of time, there's going to be a limitation on the number of seats in this place, probably less than they're currently seating for some period of time. So, but I can't emphasize enough, in order to be ADA compliant and create these safer and more comfortable areas, there is no choice but to physically expand the facility. Without doing that, the remodeling and expansion simply can't take place.
Like Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any argument with you, Mr. Pesic, that the restaurant, could use some updating. And I have no argument that it's, been an institution for decades here. Parking here and throughout the city is an issue. It has been, and it's going to continue for some time. But I guess what I'd like a little clarification on is regarding the conversations with the neighboring property and Mr. LePage. As I indicated at the last meeting, it would certainly be my preference to have a private contract entered into between the parties. And is it Mr. LePage's position, as you understand it, that he is not in a position now to enter into a formal agreement, or is his intent just period, I'm not going to enter into a formal agreement?
Initially, we were in the email that's attached to my supplemental letter as Exhibit A, where he indicates his support for the project. He indicated that due to the death of his partner, he was unable to enter into a formal agreement. In reaching out to him again, I had a number of conversations with his attorney. Actually, his attorney is Rick Ratner, and I see he's actually in the audience tonight, and he may have some comments to make. But we inquired in every way possible. First of all, we said, I said to Mr. Ratner, clearly our preference would be to formalize the agreement that the informal agreement that currently exists, and that would, of course, remove the need for the variance altogether. That was a no. I also said we'd also consider some sort of a lease or a license agreement for, at minimum, we understand to be six spaces that he has on site that are in excess of what his parking requirements are. And for that matter, a lease of the 17 spaces, if that would be acceptable. And we also mentioned the possibility of sharing on-street parking. And the answer came back, no, that he wasn't willing to do any of those things. Now, I can't predict what he might be willing to do 5 or 10 years from now. And we appreciate very much his support of the project and the informal reciprocal arrangement that we have. But as far as we've been told, there is no interest in entering into such agreement. And it was not a no, not this year, but come back and ask me next year, come back and ask me 5 years from now. It was just no. And I can't tell you what his thinking is or what, if any, plans he might have that is causing him to say no. It may just simply be, and I would understand that he doesn't want to put a permanent encumbrance or a long-term encumbrance on his property for whatever reason, whether it's because of future plans or, the intent to sell it or whatever, but he simply is not agreeable to anything in the nature of a written agreement that would put a long-term or permanent encumbrance on the property. And again, if Mr. Ratner is going to speak, perhaps he can.
No, he's not going to speak. We said we allow the one person to speak on behalf of the petitioner. If you needed technical support, somebody else could speak. He doesn't.
No, I'm not asking him to speak on behalf of petitioner. What I was saying is if he was intended to make comments, that he might address that. I'm not asking him to speak on behalf of petitioner. I didn't mean to create that confusion, and I apologize if there was confusion there.
Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to comment on this appeal? And again, as I indicated before, we need you to state your name and address for the record and why you're speaking, why you're either in favor or against it. All right, I see Mr. Ratner has raised his hand. He also represents the petitioner, right?
No, he represents.
Who does he represent?
I represent Norm LePage.
Okay. So you're speaking on behalf of Mr. LePage?
Yes.
All right.
Am I allowed to speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. First of all, Mr. Pesek.
Let's identify yourself, name and address. Yes, no.
Name is Rick.
And we got a 3-minute limit here too.
My name is Rick Ratner, 380 North Old Woodward, from the firm of Williams, Ratner and Plunkett. I'm here for Norm. He did give a email to the petitioner in support of this variance, and he continues to be in support. If I might say, his heart is with this granting of this variance. These people have been terrific neighbors, and he hopes that they continue to be great neighbors. Conditions of his ownership of this property and other matters prevent him from doing more than being a vocal supporter and sending me to this meeting, because he would like to see them continue, improve, and be able to do what they want to. You have brought up several issues very thoroughly. One of them I'd like to hit on. This is an unusual area, and all of us that have clients there or own property there have benefited from this unusual rail district. To keep that district the way it is, it has to be flexible. And it was not our intent to violate any rules or ordinances, but to use these ordinances in the spirit and intent that they were intended. And the intent is to be flexible so that we can make a decision that is to the benefit of the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of that area and the whole community. Here we have a restaurant that is walked to by not only the people in the neighborhood, but people who work there, or people who have apartments there or condos. And it's next to Griffin Claw. We are building a real center of this city that is so well needed. And I would hope that because of a 300 square foot extension, we can see our way clear to granting a variance to allow the use of that restaurant to continue with a very small variance in size so that the restaurant can operate the way, but on a much better plane with aisles that we can walk on and no step up for people in a wheelchair, crutches, or anything can go to that restaurant and work there in safety. So Norm LePage fully in support of this. That's why I'm here. And I think it's important that the neighborhood, that the neighbor support be voiced at this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radner. Would anybody else in the audience like to speak to this appeal? All right. I see nobody else raising their hand. Would someone like to make a motion? We're taking no further comments from the public. Someone might make a motion? Mr. Rodriguez?
Case 20-22, I would move to approve the requested variance because I do believe a practical difficulty has been established in this case. I don't think that the need for the variance was self-created and really does exist because of, the unique size and shape and not only characteristics of the property, but its location as it relates to the neighboring properties and certainly the requirements of the Eaton Road corridor and the Eaton Road MX district. I do believe that granting the variance will result in substantial justice to the public and will in fact be consistent with and in fact encouraged by the plans and including the proposed updates to the Birmingham plans that do recommend working with more lenient standards. So for those reasons, I would move to approve and tie it as submitted to the plans presented.
Is there a second? Mr. Canvasser?
Second.
All right. Motion's been made by Mr. Rodriguez and seconded by Mr. Canvasser. Are there any comments? Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, I mean, I seconded this motion and I did it a little hesitantly, but I think at the end of the day, I agree with Mr. Rodriguez. And I think, parking is an issue before this, parking is going to be an issue after this, and parking is going to be an issue until the city comes up with something to correct it. But Whistle Stop has been an institution. Hopefully it'll continue to be an institution in the city of Birmingham. It's in desperate need of in my opinion, of this update. I would like to specifically mention to Mr. Pesic, to Mr. Ratner, that they continue to keep a dialogue open. Their clients continue to keep a dialogue open. That the parking lot be continued to be at least informally used, and hopefully that they come to some agreement. I mean, the only reason I even am hesitant is, alternatively, I would seek another adjournment while they continue to try to work something out formally. That would have been my preference, but based on what we've heard today, it may be a substantial amount of time that may occur. So I'm seconding the motion. I'll support it, but I really want to encourage the petitioner and Mr. Ratner, his client, to try to find a way to contractually come up with a solution here.
Okay, thank you. I am going to oppose the motion. The way I look at this is that we're taking a size 12-foot, trying to shoehorn it into an 8-foot shoe. I'm worried about the parking. That's my biggest concern, because I saw what happened with the Pancake House on Woodward and the mess that created because of the parking situation. So, yeah, you're right that it's already a parking problem, but all we're going to do is be exacerbating it. So that's the reason I'm opposing it. Any other comments? Mr. Hart.
Yes, I'm going to support the motion because I think it's I think the applicant has demonstrated, in so many ways the difficulty has appropriately described the use and the destination for like pedestrians within that area. I live in the neighborhood, and And when I lived over in Court Lake Estates, I don't think I rarely took my car there, but I was there every Saturday. So I know there's a lot, even from my own experience, there are a lot of pedestrian traffic people coming in there. I think it's really important that making this effort for compliance to Michigan barrier-free and ADA requirements. That's a very hard item to tackle, and I commend them for doing it. And I think that alone can be a real big problem in the next few years. I think that people are going to be really over a barrel if they don't address those issues. So I commend them for doing that. The recent pandemic also makes it very difficult to run a successful business, and I think this is a logical and very sensible approach, and I will support the motion.
All right. Any other comments? Okay. The motion is to approve the variance as advertised. Call the roll, please.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Charles Lilly,
No.
John Miller,
Yes.
Eric Morgenroth.
No.
All right. The motion passes. You have your variance.
Congratulations.
Okay. Appeal 20-16 1602 Cole.
This is Jeff Zilke with the City of Birmingham, here to present case 20-16, property known as 1602 Cole Street. Request the following variances to construct a detached garage. The appellant was in front of the board back in March, and at that time it was tabled for some redesign and rework to eliminate a few variances. Tonight they're looking for two variances. Variance A, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.30G of the zoning ordinance requires that a maximum building height for accessory structures in an R3 district is 14.5 feet to the midpoint of the roof. The proposed midpoint is 15.5 feet. Therefore, a variance of 1 foot is being requested. Variance B, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.03J of the zoning ordinance requires the dormers on accessory structures are limited to 50% or less of the width of the roof per elevation, or 10-foot interior dimension, whichever is greater. The proposed dormer width on the east side is 100% of the width of the roof. Therefore, a variance of 50% of the width is being requested. As you can see on the elevation, back in March, they reduced the side yard setback. They brought it into variance at the 3 foot. Back in March, it was at 1.1 foot. They reduced the size of the garage, the dashed line around it. It brings it in compliance with the square footage that's required, and which leads to the two variances that they're asking for tonight. And should you have any questions?
Okay, Mr. Silke, the dormer to the faces west, that's in compliance, correct? Proposed dormer?
To the west, yes. Street side, yes.
All right. And is the dormer that faces east, is that the one that's also causing the problem with the maximum building height?
It's the width of it, not necessarily causing a issue with the height of it. Just with it being the whole width of the garage, and the ordinance says it's limited to 50% of the width of the roof. All
right. Could he change the slope of the roof to comply with the height requirement?
I would think it's definitely possible, but I know and I know the appellant can speak for it. I know they went through some renditions to modify it, and I know they reduced the height to what R1 zoning districts would be, but I know the appellant can speak more to it. I know in the situation, I'm sure it could probably be redesigned to match the ordinance in every which way.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Mr. Miller?
Yes. I was wondering about the definition of the large dormer. Isn't it, when it goes end to end, isn't it also kind of a gable? Like the other two sides, like the north and south side, they're considered more of a gabled side. I don't know how is that determination made?
I would agree with that statement, but I know through discussion here, there's one main roof line and the other roof lines attached to it are considered dormers. With the time I've been here, when the dormers got relooked at in the ordinance and got changed, dormers on the side, if it was projected out more than 24 inches, then it wouldn't be considered a dormer. It would have been a reverse gable. With it being in the same plane going up, that's where it fell under the definition of a dormer.
Okay. And if the building's first floor came down a foot, would that put the problem with the roof back into compliance? Is it just the overall height of the building, or is it the configuration of the roof?
If the sidewalls were dropped down a foot, I don't know what the height is on the first floor of the garage area. Lowering the walls down a foot should bring that in compliance because it bring the whole thing down.
Okay, because they have just over 9 foot of clearance headroom in the first floor. If they went down to 8 feet, I think that would bring it into compliance without having to change the slope of the roof or anything. And I think you're agreeing with that.
Yeah, I would think so. Lowering it a foot, it would bring everything down.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Okay, who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Craig Ludwig.
Good evening, Mr. Ludwig. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. I tried to do the best, or we tried to do the best, I should say, Mr. Lilly, of doing what you suggested. We took 4 proposed variance requests and really just only have the one remaining one. It was my understanding that really nothing's changed. It was just the 3 gables were permissible before, and for some reason how they became, as Mr. Miller had stated, he didn't believe maybe that it should be considered a dormer as well, especially since there's a chimney on each side of it. So, but yes, really the only thing that we're asking for now is just the midpoint. The overall square footage of the lot itself, it's an R3 zoned neighborhood, but the overall square footage of the lot is closer to an R1 size. There's 6 adjoining lots in a row. I'm the furthest to the west on the corner. Every one of them is about roughly the same size in terms of square footage. I actually have a neighbor across the street that has a similar garage, but it has 4 dormers on it that I can see just staring across the street to the west. And then to the east, I actually have a neighbor 2 doors down that has a full 2-story garage. So it wouldn't be like sticking out of place. But the sole intention really, honestly, is so that I can get office space for work. It was my understanding, I had spoken to Jenna Ecker, and she had said that there's a clause in the ordinance where you can request additional spacing for on-premise workspace. And so what you've asked or said is probably true. It probably could be dropped down a foot, but it's my understanding that the people doing the framing said that in order to get the staircase in it, that we really wouldn't have any usable space above, which was kind of the purpose for the whole project in the first place. And so that's kind of where we're at. We shrank the footprint down to under 575, which is an R3 footprint. And I even told the person doing the plans or sketches that I did not want to use the space in the front to max out the 575, just because, as you mentioned in your former meeting, it's just, I like to be able to have a vehicle parked above the sidewalk without, the overhanging above it. So we're, I don't really foresee us being with our grade. It won't look out of place. Let me just say that. There's an actual new construction garage butting right up to it right now. And I want to say that our ridge line will be just about the same height as that one. I think just our chimney may, be up, obviously 3 or 4 foot higher than that. So, but we're requesting this, or I'm requesting this just due to parking, not being able to park on the street and having cars, not having the ability to have a long driveway. So we're actually going to put hoists in. That was the idea as well, is to put hoists. We have 4 cars right now. We're in bus lane to the west of us on Torrey. And the police have asked me before to move vehicles, or they would write me a ticket due to parking. So we're kind of already planning on doing the whole Manhattan project deal and putting in 2 rotary lifts in the inside of the garage and just leaving the truck outside, even as it stands now. So we were hopeful that, with us needing workspace as well as additional parking, that we would be able to show a need for this venture project.
Okay. Tell us why you can't comply with the ordinance as far as the dormer on the west side. Why does it have to go all the way across? Why can't it be the 10 foot or?
Oh, the dormer on the west side, towards the Storey side or above the garage doors is. No,
I'm sorry, I misspoke. On the east side. It's on the east side.
Oh yes. Well, because there's a chimney proposed or planned there, just so that in the wintertime, since there's no utilities, water or sewer that run on Torrey at all under the civil engineering planning, they only run on coal. So the thought process was that we'd be able to, using a fireplace on the second story in order to heat that area for work or whatnot out there seasonally, and thus the chimney would be centered on that wall. So there would have to be some sort of a I guess, I'm not sure what the technical term is called for it, but like an awning or some sort of a roofed space so that the water would run around it anyway. And we also need the third gable, I guess, would be on that east side, not just at the ridge. It won't be any higher on the ridge height than the east-west running ridge. But for the staircase to go to the second story, so it's kind of helping with regards to the head space that we need to meet for code with regards to walking up a 3 foot wide set of stairs to the second story.
Couldn't you put the stairs on the outside? And why? And instead of having the fireplace, how about a space heater?
Well, sir, I mean, it's my understanding that stairs aren't allowed on the outside. That's what I was told, that stairs are not allowed on the outside. We didn't ask for the full 10% increase on the square foot of the footprint. We just opted to go with a smaller size floor plan. And yeah, you're correct. I guess it's possible we could put a space heater, but be electric, and electricity tends to be a little expensive or pricey. So it was just the traditional thought of just having a wood burning fireplace.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the petitioner? All right. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak to this appeal? Okay, I see no hands up. So we're going to close public comment. Does someone want to make a motion? Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, so it's nobody's volunteering. In regards to appeal 20-16, the property located at 1602 Cole, I would move to deny the requested variances. I think this is self-created. I think that the petitioner could comply with the ordinance. And so I don't think strict compliance with the ordinance will unreasonably prevent petitioner from using the property. I haven't heard anything that compliance would be unnecessarily burdensome, or that the variance will somehow do some substantial justice to property owners in the area. And I'm not sure if there's any unique circumstances here either. So I don't believe any of the factors we need to look at in that. So I would deny the request.
Is there a second? Mr. Rodriguez?
Second.
All right, motion's been made by Mr. Canvasser, seconded by Mr. Rodriguez. Any discussion? Mr. Morganrod.
So I appreciate the mitigation that the appellant has provided to try to meet the ordinance. I think I want a garage like this, based on a full masonry fireplace and a slate roof and dormers with metal and all that jazz. I think and that might be my dream garage in Cape Cod. The problem is that the criteria for which I can approve is not based on my own desire, but as Jason mentioned, whether it's self-created, and the desire to have a wood-burning fireplace in this garage and the ceiling heights for lifts are really just the limitations that the ordinances allow us to provide. So I have to support the motion because I have to stick with what the city allows versus what it doesn't allow.
Okay, any other comments? All right, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I also agree that you can't get around this being self-created. The ordinances are written to allow that nice second story above the garage, and there's a lot of examples of them in Birmingham where you have the full second story, but it's just the design of the roof and the gables that are really creating the hardship. So that hardship is indeed self-created, and I would support the motion to deny because of that.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, the motion is to deny. Call the roll, please.
Jason Canvasser?
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez?
Yes.
Kevin Hart?
No.
Richard Lilly?
Yes.
Charles Lilly?
Yes.
John Miller?
Yes.
Eric Morganroth?
Yes.
Okay, so the requested variances have been denied. All right, calling appeal 20-27-1884 Melton.
Jeff Zilke from the city of Birmingham, presenting case 20-27. Property known as 1884 West Melton. Request the following variance to construct a new single-family home with an attached garage. Variance A, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.74C of the zoning ordinance requires that a minimum distance between principal residential buildings on adjacent lots of 14 feet or 25% of the total lot, whichever is larger. The required distance is 20 feet. The proposed is 15.72 feet. Therefore, a variance of 4.28 feet is being requested on the west side. Variance B, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.74C of the zoning ordinance requires a minimum distance between principal residential buildings on adjacent lots of 14 feet or 25% of the total lot width, whichever is larger. The required distance is 20 feet. The proposed is 16.06 feet. Therefore, a variance of 3.94 feet is being requested on the east side. The appellant meets all the zoning on their lot with the exception of the distance between structures. And that's why they were here for the variance tonight. As you can see on both sides, the existing home is with the hash lines around it was showed a little bit more non-conforming. With the new proposed, they reduced it to meet the ordinance, and it still creates the problem with the distance between structures from the house to the west and also to the east. Should you have any questions?
Do you know the lot widths on the lots on either side?
I believe they're both 80 feet, so they would require 20 feet total side yards also.
So are both houses then on either side non-conforming?
Yes, they don't meet the total distance between, and I don't know for certain if they meet the total side yards on their own lots.
Okay. And
well, looking at the footprint, they're very similar to the house on here that's proposed to be demolished. So I'm assuming that they are very similar in nature.
okay, and I noticed this lot is not exactly a rectangle. The front lot line is a little longer than the rear lot line, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Lilly.
So if the two houses on either side weren't there, would the house be in compliance?
Yes, it would.
Okay. Another question.
Any other questions for Mr. Zilke? All right. Who is going to speak on behalf of the petitioner? Well, Mary, I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Mr. Miller?
Yes. I did have a question. And when I walked up and down the street, it seemed, the houses on either side of the street are similar, seemed built at the same time and kind of a similar style. They all seemed closer together than 20 feet. So it seemed like when the houses on that street were built, that all the houses were much closer together at that time. Is that your impression? I mean, I didn't measure it, but I did a visual up and down the street. Is that your impression also, Mr. Zilke?
Yes, I mean about the age frame of the house, and they all around the same time, same distance between. That's without knowing the exact number. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Zilke? All right, now we'll go to the petitioner. Who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Patrick Ray of Hill and Homes.
Okay, welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. So Alex and Kate Karchan currently live in the home to the east of this particular property, and they wanted to buy this property and obviously expand their family and live in Birmingham, which is their intent. And as Jeff said, I don't particularly believe that any of these hardships for this property were created by our own design. And we're actually taking the new structure and by Alex and Kate's intent, making it slightly smaller than what is existing. So we're actually reducing the size of the footprint that exists presently. this property and the reason for its purchase was to build while they're there, and then eventually do something with the house next door. And I think Jeff said it just about the way I would, really.
Okay. Any questions for the petitioner? All right. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak with regard to this appeal? Okay, Alex Karchan. Please state. Alex.
This is Alex Karchan. I live to the west, adjacent to 1884 West Melton. I am, in fact, own the house in question or the property in question as well. I just wanted to correct one item that was stated earlier regarding the width of 1854, which is the lot to the left, to the west. It's actually, I believe, 107 feet wide. And, you know, as stated, all these homes are not to today's ordinance. They're very close. And I obviously support this variance.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. And anyone else want to speak to this appeal? It's called Team Gutty.
Can you guys hear me? This is Steve Gutterson. I live at 1857 West Mountain, across the street.
Yes.
Question. We're in support. Like you guys have already stated, all the houses are really close. I think what they're doing is great for the street and the neighborhood. So we're in full support of them.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else want to speak to this appeal? Okay. I don't see any other hands. So I'm going to close public comment. Who wants to make a motion? Mr. Rodriguez, you had your hand up first.
For case 20-27, I would move to approve both variances because the petitioner has established a practical difficulty. Here, there are unique circumstances applying to the property in light of the existing non-conforming homes to the east and west. It's also evident that the requested variance was not self-created, and the variance is the minimum necessary, and indeed they're reducing the existing non-conformity. So for those reasons, I would move to approve and tie it to the plans as submitted.
Support.
Second.
All right. Mr. Margaroff, that was you?
That was me. Oh, you got to see a hand? Okay.
I have to acknowledge you. Okay. Motion by Mr. Rodriguez, supported by Mr. Morgan-Roth. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, this is a bit unique, I believe, because by granting this appeal, we would actually provide more conformity in the neighborhood as opposed to following the zoning as it's written, which would cause an unconformity. So kind of interesting, but I certainly support the appeal. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, the motion is to approve. Call the roll, please.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Charles Lilly,
Yes.
John Miller.
Yes.
All right. You have your variance. All right. Calling appeal 20-28, 1165 Hillside. Before we start off on this, who's going to speak?
Jeff.
All right. It seems to me we need some more information. Normally on these where we get into setback issue, we also get a little drawing survey showing the distance of the houses along the street, because on occasion there can be a fair uniformity, but there can be one house that's way off and it throws off the the front setback. So for myself, I would like to see more information before we even deal with this appeal. I leave it up to the board members. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. When I looked this over, I felt like I did need more information. That the site plan really didn't provide enough to determine the relationship of the house in the neighborhood. And even driving up and down the street, it's a very unusual situation, unusual lot. So I completely agree with you that we'd like to see a little bit more of the surrounding area to make the determination.
Mr. Morganroth?
Yeah, I'd also like to see the building envelope, the buildable area on the property, just so I can see what's available on all four sides, even though it's a trapezoid, not four sides, but what's available to shift the house forward, backward, left, and right.
Okay. So, what is it, Mr. Nieder, who's going to speak for the petitioner? Can you hear me now, Can you speak, Mr. Nieder?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So you've heard what we want.
Did you receive the existing as-built survey in your packet? Yeah. The drawing included a setback table, which listed all the neighboring setbacks.
That's the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, he's saying at the top it shows the setbacks of every home in the table.
Is that not enough to go by?
Yeah. Well, what, Mr. Morganroth, do you have everything you need or not?
I mean, again, I'd like to see where the building envelope is. I guess we can do it by discussion when we say that he's 41 feet from, one side and 3179 from another. I guess someone can identify how much space there is to move left to right or front to back. I guess I could probably ask the questions and get the answer.
Did you also receive the sheet A1 site plan?
I only have one site plan and then the blueprints.
And in the blueprint sheet A1.
A1 shows it?
Yeah.
Maybe my fault. A1. Yeah, I have A1. Yeah, that helps.
Sheet A1 is up on the screen now. You should be able to see it there.
Yeah, now I can see it. Yeah. Oh, he's touching every corner of the envelope. All right.
Okay. We're first of all, I'm Brian Nieper, 630.
All right. Well, we're not going to let you make your presentation. Mr. Silke. If we're going to go ahead with this, Mr. Silke will do his, and then you get your chance.
Okay. Thank you.
So does everybody have what they need?
Yeah.
Well, yes, Mr. Miller.
Yeah, we can proceed, I believe, but I know there's going to be concern by the other folks in the surrounding neighborhood about this house. And when you don't have a drawing that shows it in relation to the other houses on the street and some of the neighboring houses, it will make the determination more difficult, I believe, but not impossible to proceed if that's what the petitioner desires.
Any other, Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Mr. Miller. I think while we probably do have enough information, it would be awfully helpful to have that expanded with the.
Yes, Mr. Hart.
would agree, Chairman. I think the information is there, but it's going to take, the setback table, the two setback tables calling out the house numbers. I mean, none of these houses are labeled. It needs to, I think, this definitely needs more detail in a graphic sense. I mean, there's a written table at the top, but for us to decipher this, it would take us, unless they have a really strong argument, it would be very difficult to support. There's obviously some unique circumstances with this, and I think it would serve the client much better to have a better graphic than this, because it's going to be tough to get through it.
Right, I agree. All right. So someone want to make a motion to table this until next month's meeting and also sort of list what we're looking for? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I would motion to table appeal number. What appeal number is this?
28.
I'm sorry. Yes, and in terms of the information provided, I think not only the adjacent homes, but the homes certainly to the north and possibly even across the street to get a sense of how this house fits in with the neighborhood. It's such a unique piece of property, and even the way the existing homes sit on this street is very unusual. Again, I think for us to make a determination, we would want to see an expanded site plan that takes into consideration the rest of the houses, certainly up the street, up to Lincoln, and even the houses facing the corner across the street, to get an understanding of how this house will sit within its neighborhood setting.
Second.
Is there a second? Mr. Organrod?
Yes.
You second it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. All right. So a motion's been made and seconded to adjourn this to the next regularly scheduled meeting and to provide the material as stated. Call the roll, please.
Don Miller,
Yes.
Eric Morganroth,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez,
Yes.
Jason Kempisser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Charles Lilly.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Nieper, you got your instructions of what we need. We'll see you next month.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Calling appeal 20-29515 Westwood.
Jeff Zilke here to present case 20-29, property known as 515 Westwood, request the following variances to construct an addition to the existing non-conforming home. Variance A, Chapter 126, Article 2, Section 2.06.2 of the zoning ordinance requires a minimum rear yard setback is 30 feet. The proposed is 23.13 feet. Therefore, a variance of 6.87 feet is being requested. Variance B, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.61A1 of the zoning ordinance requires that a corner lot has on its side street abutting interior residential lot shall have a minimum setback from the street side equal to the minimum front yard setback in the zoning district in which such building is located. The required side yard setback is 22.56 feet. The proposed is 17.06 feet. Therefore, a variance of 5.50 feet is being requested. This home, there was a variance granted back in 2014 for the distance between on the north side, which was granted in 2014, along with a front yard setback back in 14. And then also back in 2005, there was a rear yard setback variance granted that has never come to fruition for a similar distance, actually a little bit more back in 2005. With saying that, do you have any questions?
Yeah. If they eliminated, they want a 3-car garage. If they made a 2-car garage, would they need the rear yard setback?
No, if they eliminated the, I guess, and this shows, no, if they reduced it down, they maintained the 30-foot rear yard setback, it wouldn't be needed.
All right, and on the I'm looking. I got to find the depth of the garage. We have any information? You know how deep this proposed garage is?
Hold on.
29 feet on the long side.
We don't know what it is on the short side.
Looks like there's a maybe 21.4. It's hard to tell.
I'm pulling up the.
If you take off the 7 feet of the width of the mudroom, it approximately would be that. So it's about 21.
All right. So would that be the minimum depth for a garage?
21, yeah.
Okay. So in this case, the Mr. Zucchi, because the house behind it, is that even that's in the township, isn't it?
Correct. So that's in Bloomfield Township, where that butts up to the side yard of that house.
Yeah. All right, but it's rear to rear.
It's rear to side yard.
Oh, it is rear to side yard. Okay. All right, so that's why it has to be the same as the front setback, as opposed to 10 feet, right?
Correct. And 15 foot for the doors facing the street.
Right. Okay, Mr. Canvasser.
Yeah, for that garage area, isn't there an existing 3-car garage there already? Are they just building above it? Or are they taking that out and rebuilding?
They are extending the bay onto it. Actually, there is a 3-car garage. They're creating a bedroom on the 1-car garage closer, and they're extending an additional bay because I believe there's an ailing parent.
Okay, so they're okay.
Converting one bay and adding on to the other bay.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies my question.
All right, can you put up the screen? I can't see all the board members, so I can't tell if anybody else has a question or not. All right, any other board members have a question for Mr. Silke? One other. So there is already a non-conformity as far as the rear setback?
No, right now it is. Back in 2005, they did not perform the work. That one granted back in 2005 that was not done. There would have been a variance that was granted for 7.73 feet, and they're asking for 6.87 feet.
Right, and that requested variance for something slightly different.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I just say that variance was for something slightly different than what they're proposing now.
Correct.
Okay. All right, who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Ron Stern from Bob Stern Building Company on behalf of the petitioners, Michael and Heather Dresden. All right, good evening.
Good evening.
So for variance A for the rear setback, which requires a minimum of 30 feet. There was an existing variance that was granted back in 2005, as Mr. Zilke mentioned. That variance, I have seen the plans, was actually for an additional garage bay at that time. We will be adding another garage bay as we will be converting the bay that is closest to the house to a in-law suite. The petitioner's parents that live in Illinois will be moving or are planning on moving in with them if this goes forward. They will have a comfortable bedroom, bathroom, closet, suite for them on the first floor to make it easy for them. We're actually asking for less of a variance than the original variance that was granted back in 2005, approximately a foot less than that. As was mentioned, the rear neighbor is in Bloomfield Village at 516 Waddington. That house really is around the corner on Pine Street. The backyard, our backyard backs up to their side yard. It's a corner lot. That is their garage, which is not even visible from my client's yard at all. There's a big bank of trees in the backyard there that covers that. Currently, there is a 3-car garage, and they would like to maintain that. With the in-laws moving in, they also have 4 children and a nanny. So garage space and storage space is definitely prime for real estate for them. For the second variance, the 5'5" variance, we will still be maintaining the 15-foot required setback, which will be 17.06 feet at the closest. If you look at some of the other houses on the survey, look directly across the street at 528 Westwood. Actually, across the street is 528 Westwood, which is a large old house that was built in 1929. That house was built on a double lot and sits 31.9 feet off of the side lot. That is really the only house that is affecting the dimensions here, which will require this variance. All the other houses, 485 Westwood is very close to the setback. 482 Westwood, which is right across the street, is 11.83 feet from the setback. 515 Glenhurst is only 11.1 feet. So the only house in question would be the house directly across the street. The extra space that is needed for this variance would be for a hallway behind the new in-law suite as an entrance to the suite and an entrance to the garages. There will also be space behind there for a mudroom and entryway off of the garage.
All right. Any questions for the petitioner? All right. Does anybody in the audience want to comment on this appeal?
Chuck, I had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you. Mr. Morgan, Ron?
So, you're modifying the family room too, correct?
We will be putting an addition on the family room in the rear of the house, which will not affect the setback.
Was there a consideration to shrink the family room by a couple feet to pull that whole 3-car garage module, even with the in-law suite? Because you're building all that space anyway. I get the hallway.
So you're saying the family, can you just repeat that?
Yeah, the family room has a 25-foot dimension to the hallway wall. Could the whole module of the mudroom and the garage be reconfigured to pull that space in a couple of feet?
Probably not, just because right now there's currently a stairs going down to the basement that will have to be filled in order to make space for that.
Is that not shown on the plan?
I don't believe it is.
So you're getting rid of it anyway?
Correct.
You heard I'm saying that if you could maintain the garage depth, maintain some form of a hallway, even if some of the closets got compromised, and then the family room wasn't 25, which is a big dimension, maybe that one variance wouldn't be required, the 17.
at the very least, I mean, maybe a couple feet in order to maintain it. But I really don't think it's going to make too much of a difference. I don't think it's really visible. We're also keeping the architectural integrity of the house. If you look at the elevation, we're kind of keeping it exactly how it was. It is. There is a second floor addition going on above this house. It sets back a little bit from the garage.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sir?
Yeah, I mean, what about the exercise room and the family room? Is there a way to take that in-law suite and put it back there without needing such either a variance or such a large variance?
The exercise room is actually an addition that was put on previously, which is kind of standalone. So this new family room addition will be butting up to that. Currently, that isn't a home office, which will be moved upstairs.
Right, but if you, I mean, could you trim the exercise room and in conjunction with the family room, create the in-law suite over there?
Well, the exercise room is actually a 2-story addition. There's a master closet above that. So it'd be really hard to reconfigure that without tearing the whole structure down.
Okay. I see that. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for the petitioner? Anyone in the audience want to speak to this appeal? Okay, I see none. Someone want to make a motion? Mr. Morganroth?
Regarding case number 20-29, 515 Westwood, regarding appeals, or chapter 126, article 2, section 2.06.2, and chapter 126, article 4, section 4.61. A1, I move to deny the variance request. It appears that this remodeling, although I understand the client's need for the in-laws, is self-created. The spaces that are there are generous. It appears that some of those spaces could be reduced with the blank sheet of paper they're using to design the additions. And I feel like there could be additional mitigation to achieve what they want to achieve. I understand that the desire to have a 3-car garage, they want to maintain that, but converting one of the bays into that in-law suite does compromise that. And it just seems as if these things are purely wants and not something that isn't self-created. So for that reason, I propose to deny.
Is there a second? Mr. Camisser?
Second.
Okay, a motion's been made and seconded to deny the requested variances. I am going to support this motion, and if you read the one in 2005, you shouldn't be surprised. We have been very judicious about not giving variances in the rear setback. Now, granted, there was a motion that was approved in 2005 where there was a rear setback granted, but that was the luck of my opinion, that was the luck of the draw of who was there that night. I strongly believe had the 3 permanent members been there, it would have been denied. But anyhow, that's my opinion. But as I said, the reason I'm opposing this is because we had just been very tough, real sticklers on encroaching in the rear open space. Any other comments? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I will support the motion also. I'm looking for a reason other than being self-created, some other unique circumstance or unique hardship. And gosh, I looked very hard, but I just couldn't find one. So for that reason, I will also support the motion.
Okay, any other comments? All right. So the motion is to deny. Call the roll, please.
Eric Morganwell,
Yes.
Jason Canvasser,
Yes.
Kevin Hart,
Yes.
Richard Lilly,
Yes.
Charles Lilly,
Yes.
Don Miller,
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez.
Yes.
Okay. So the appeal has been denied. Okay, calling appeal 2030-1055 Lark.
This is Jeff Zilke here to present case 20-30, property known as 1055 Larchley. Request the following variance to expand the impervious surface in the required front open space. Variance A, Chapter 126, Article 4, Section 4.31A, Number 1 of the zoning ordinance requires a minimum of 65% of the front open space in a single-family district shall be free of paved surfaces. The required is 65%, which would be 2,120 square feet. The proposed is 59% of 1,932 square feet, therefore a variance of 6% or 188 square feet is being requested. Should you have any questions, this house is still under construction as it sits. It was approved with a circle driveway, and they're expanding on the pavement area in the front, where it's bringing the request of the 188 square feet before you tonight.
Okay. Well, I love these percentages. I'm kind of surprised it was presented this way, because usually I've seen it. It's the 35%, and this is the much they want to go over. They're going over 188 feet, and I know how you guys like to show it. 6% doesn't sound like but much of a change when you look at this percentage that way. But when you do this, the allowed paving is 1,141.5 feet approximately, and the proposed is 1,329.5 feet. And when you divide what is allowed, the 35%, the actual footage, by what they're proposing, there's a 16.5% difference between what's allowed and what they're proposing. I mean, it does. I know how you guys you do it that way. I've quibbled with you before on these percentages. This is no big deal. So and I see their argument is that they want a circular drive. Well, this year doesn't look like a circular drive to me. You know what? You happen to know what the parking area is over by the garage on the north side of the house?
Square footage wise?
Yeah, got any idea?
I'm trying to zoom in.
Well, there's a lot there. I guess we're not going to worry. Don't worry about it. But if they put in truly a circular drive, do they comply with the lot coverage in the front?
Yes, what was originally approved with the house under construction, it was pushed right to the limit to about 35%. With this proposal, which you see on, if you pull up the site plan, there's some red lines on it with the additional footage that they're asking for, and then it's getting squared up on the south side. If we scroll down to the site plan, the red line is the additional square footage or the modification that they're asking for. The dotted hatched in area is what was approved back in 18 when this permit was approved, where you can see the additional square footage that is being requested for the required front yard.
All right. So what was approved was it met the ordinance.
Correct.
All right. And any other questions for Mr. Zilke? Mr. Canvasser?
Yeah, 2 questions. So if I'm looking at this correctly, they're trying to take the approved 10-foot driveway and expand it, and it's kind of, we'll call it the straightaway to 12 feet, correct?
Correct.
And then they're also looking to take that rounded edge. I'm not sure which direction that is, but at the bottom of the page and square that off and add there as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Is there a minimum amount of the driveway? I mean, could it even, does it have to even be 10 feet? Could it have been 8 or 9 feet?
8 foot would probably be the minimum. 9 foot is usually typical. But with that turn, 10 foot, I wouldn't think would be too far off of being able not driving on the grass. But I don't know the total specifics.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Zilke? All right, who's going to speak on behalf of the petitioner?
Hang in. Hello?
Hi. Yep, we see you. Mr. Whetstone?
Mr. Whetstone, yes. Matt Whetstone, presenting for Christopher Dreckman, the homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
So what we've asked for is the initial driveway was approved. It did meet the requirements at the 10-foot width coming across parallel with the front of the house. What Chris is trying to do is we're trying to get there's 2 different options, 2 different items here. So the first one is we're trying to widen that 10-foot to a 12-foot width just to make that turn a little bit more comfortable and give a little bit more room for people getting in and out of a car where they can step on pavement and not grass. The corner, which is on that southeast portion that you've asked for, that is to give him an area to kind of push snow in the wintertime and to have somebody where they could pull up straight and not go into the circle, just to give them an additional parking space over there. What we're asking for on the front yard coverage is, 188 square feet overall. On our overall lot coverage, the way we have it, and even with taking into account a proposed pool house in the back that he's looking to do at a future date, we would still be under the overall coverage by an additional 291 feet on our overall lot. We'd be underneath what's the minimum requirement is. It's just a front yard that we're asking for, about 188 square feet to make the driveway a little bit more functional for them. It is going to be screened from the street. We have an evergreen 36-inch high hedge that's going to come across between the drive and the city sidewalk to soften it, for aesthetics and everything. It's going to be an exposed aggregate driveway, not just a stark white, so it'll have a little bit softer tone to it. And everything else. So it's just to kind of make it a little bit more ease of use, for when people come over, visit, parking, so they're not having to park on the street.
But you could comply with the ordinance, right?
It could be complied with the ordinance at the 10 feet, which was in there originally. Yes, at 10 feet, it just makes it a little bit more comfortable this way.
Okay, so you can comply with the 10 feet. And so if you wanted to make the drive a little wider, you could make it a little narrower. In other words, not such a big circle, you could make it tighter, correct?
We've played with that around a little bit. On the north side, we had to keep the driveway where it was because there's a couple city trees where we're trying to bring the approach through to maintain our minimum that you see on the red outline plan there. And on the south side, we're trying to keep that where it turns nice and it doesn't affect the walkway coming into the front, because that curve we're trying to keep the flat portion for the walkway where it comes in, because that would, just for aesthetics and everything there, to make it and to fit the size of the house so it looks proper and scale wise and everything. So.
Okay. Any other questions for the petitioner, Mr. Morgan Rock?
So, Mr. Whetstone, first of all, the name Whetstone for a hardscape landscaper is such a great name.
Yes. Thanks.
I see what you're trying to accomplish, and in an ideal scenario, you've got swing backs for them to back out of the garage, and you've got lots of spots to park if you don't want to block other people. But essentially, the design you had before is exactly the design you have now. You've just expanded areas for maybe symmetry and maybe other things, but there really is no hardship or practical difficulty or anything here that you can tell us a reason why you need to exceed the amount of permeable surface, right?
No, the only thing that we could go for on that is it's going to make it, it's going to make that turn a little bit easier for, if you have like an SUV or something like that, because it is a tight turn where you're coming into, and then again, when you're parked there, it allows, if you have, their parents or something come over, they've got enough room to get out of the car, step on concrete, walk off, right, where that, where it makes it a little bit more comfortable if people come over. So.
But like that swing back you have behind the garage, if you took that concrete out, there's still enough depth at 24 feet to back out of the garage and face forward. You could take some of that concrete and create a wider pad in front of the house.
Well, not really, because that doesn't come into our front yard.
What's at the front yard
coverage piece? Because it's only the front. So on our overall lot coverage, we are under. Even like I said, with the proposed pool house that is showing, it shows on the site plan, even taking that into account, our overall lot coverage we're covered. It's just that front, which is the face of the house.
Right.
Is
it's that turn, and you're concerned about cutting the grass when you take a extended SUV and make the turn.
Yes.
Right. I'm sure you'd be glad to come back every season and touch up the grass.
I would, and I fully understand. I mean, there's not, truly a true hardship or anything like that. It's, we're looking at it, really that, my presentation is, we're over the front, we're under the overall, trying to make it a little bit more comfortable for them. There's, not a true hardship. Would it work the other way? Yes. Is it more functional this way for, a family living there? Yes, but that's not truly a hardship, I guess. So, and I understand that. So
it's a beautiful design. I appreciate your responses.
All right. Any other questions for the petitioner? Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to speak to this appeal? Yes. Nitten and Perry. The one that's got his hand. Is it first name? Is it Knighton or Nitten? Yeah. Go ahead. You need to unmute him. There you go. Okay.
Hello. Good evening.
Hi.
First name is Nitten. Last name Paranjape.
Okay.
I'm south of the proposed building here, and I would like to raise my objections to this variance for the following reason. Every time it rains, if you look at Larchley, the entire street has been filled with these new homes where I believe they have been granted these variances, and all that gravel is running right down the street from Larchley and ending up at Lincoln. And it's making ruts in the side where the city property lines meet the road. And so if somebody wants a variance just for aesthetic looks, and so that somebody doesn't want to step on the grass, I don't think that's reasonable at all. This is all that water is running down into my property. I don't appreciate it. There's no reason to not have grass there to keep the water in somebody else's lot rather than running down the street. I've talked to the city before, and there's gravel that collects because all that gravel is getting washed down largely right down at the bottom of the hill, right to where it meets Lincoln. Every year I call the city and they have to have a little street sweeper come and sweep that gravel off because people turning from Lincoln onto Larchley are skidding. And that's all because we don't have enough way to trap all this runoff because people want to park their big SUVs in front. And so whether there's a variance on the front of the property, but not on the entire property, that's irrelevant. And I don't appreciate all these bigger houses being granted variances when the original plan was approved before.
Well, okay. Thank you for your comments. As far as I don't know where you come from about granting all these variances where they were originally approved for something different. That is not the case. No, sir. One of the other people wrote in like claims that somehow we're bending over backwards to help out big developers, and that is not the case. The people are being talked to about the possibilities, the likelihood of their variances, and so nobody's being encouraged to come in and seek a variance. Anybody else in the audience want to speak to this appeal? All right, someone want to make a motion? Mr. Rodriguez?
For case 20-30, I would move to deny the requested variance. In this case, by the applicant's own words, there is no practical difficulty. Indeed, I think the request for variance here is self-created, and I don't see any unique circumstances that are applying to this property that would facilitate the need for a variance. So for those reasons, I would deny.
Okay, is there a second? Mr. Lilly?
Second.
All right. Motion's been made by Mr. Rodriguez, seconded by Mr. Lilly. Any discussion? Mr. Miller?
Yeah, it's really hard to get around this as being something that's not self-created. And also, again, the petitioner's own words, his exact quote was, "This is not a hardship," quote unquote. And once that's stated, I don't think we have really any other choice but to support this motion and to deny the appeal.
Okay. Any other comments? I mean, I would agree with Ms. Miller. I don't think, but even if he hadn't made the statement, I don't think there's any support. Okay. Any other comments? All right. So the motion is to deny. Call the roll, please.
Francis Rodriguez?
Yes.
Richard Lilly?
Yes.
Charles Lilly?
Yes.
Tom Miller?
Yes.
Eric Morenoff?
Yes.
Jason Canvasser?
Yes.
Kevin Hart?
Yes.
Okay, so the requested appeal is denied. All right, Mr. Johnson, is there any correspondence that's come in that doesn't apply to any of the appeals that were before us tonight?
There is not.
All right. Is there any general business?
There is not.
All right. So now we're going to ask, is there anyone in the audience who would like to discuss anything that does not deal with one of the appeals we heard tonight? Okay. Does someone want to make a motion to adjourn? Mr. Canvasser.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Mr. Lilly Richard Lilly seconded it first. Okay. The motion is to adjourn. Call the roll, please.
Jason Canvasser?
Yes.
Richard Lilly?
Yep.
Charles Lilly?
Yes.
Don Miller?
Yes.
Eric Morgenroth?
Yes.
Francis Rodriguez?
Yes.
Kevin Hart?
Yes.
Okay, the meeting's adjourned.